Hey, beautiful family. A lot of people ask this question, which has troubled man since the dawn of time. And somehow, in certain states of being, I feel like I've answered myself that question in many different ways. But what I know is that I now know the answer to that question is very individual. And this is something that sort of breaks up and disbands the question into potential meaninglessness, because people will look at it and say, well, anyone can choose their own individual meaning. But I still think the path to finding the individual meaning of this question only comes from the same. I feel like it travels down into one narrow canyon, and then at the other end splits out into billions of forks. But everyone must travel down that narrow canyon to find those individual paths that lead them back to the answer. And the age-old question is, what's the meaning of life? And there was once a time where I felt as though I had found the meaning of life by merely being alone with myself and finding the presence of spirit in my life and the fulfillment that brings and the direction and the meaning of life that brings, and sharing that with others, letting others know, hey, just outside of yourself, just outside of all the turmoil and the emotion and the struggle and everything that you go on inside your minds with, just outside of there is a space where your mind is still and you don't interpret sound coming to you. Sound is just allowed and passes within to you without any label. And within there you don't judge these sounds as bad or good. And from that point you start to see this occurrence of your body is no difference to the occurrence of a tree or a cloud blowing. And you sink into this collective occurrence. And as Rumi said, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the whole ocean in a drop. And you enter the definition of what he's saying with that small poem. And in there, I thought this is the meaning, because everything was so profoundly, perfectly beautiful that expression alone of that was enough meaning. Expression alone of the tree growing, of my bearding, of my voice singing whatever my heart wants to sing and not my mind, but was enough. This was the meaning to me. And I guess somewhere within what I'm about to say, that's still the case, because it's only from rooting yourself in that present moment, which is reality. Humans are the animal on the planet that lives in delusion because of the ego. We live in a filtered delusion of the reality around us, and because of that we create all of this lower nature, which is spoken about in every spiritual text, and the fall of man and so on and so forth is an internal part of us. Now, when we acknowledge and we know that within us, and we find that space just outside of the turmoil of the desire and the impulses of the flesh, and to be free of desire, to be free of desiring, to be free of desire, and you go on that journey where it all cracks open, and you're just there, then somehow spirit starts to navigate and guide your life. But these days, I absolutely know that is enough. I absolutely know that the expression is enough to give meaning to this whole thing. But the problem I have within there is that the suffering was often within there too hard for me to bear. And the suffering was quadruply hard for me to bear because my mind always focused on that suffering. And so, even though my mind would focus on that suffering, these days, even though I suffer, I can rejoice because my awareness is aware that beyond the mind's turmoil is this place of peace outside of myself. And inside that place of peace, I somehow can no longer enjoy the mere expression and enjoyment of creation, because I see that others are still in that turmoil, others are still suffering, others are still wanting to be out. And so to get those persons out, you can teach, because persons have their survival needs, and so they have space to be taught. Or you can go another avenue, and you can start helping those further down who don't have their survival needs and can't even be taught because their whole day is filled with the time spent trying to live, trying to survive, trying to eat, trying to find a way to protect and care for their little ones, etc. What I've just described is the Buddha and the Bodhisattva. The Buddha finds peace in the understanding of the enlightened state, that the expression of what is enough. And Jesus spoke of it too. Who can add 1 cubit to your life with thought? Who can add anything with worry and anxiety? Take no thought for tomorrow. Jesus was in an enlightened state himself. The Buddha was in this state as well, but the Bodhisattva enters that state as Jesus was a Bodhisattva, and returns with a desperate need to show the world that there is this state beyond there, and it's a state of love and purity and caring and loving thy neighbour. It's beyond the self. And for me, what happened once I understood that part of it, that state, was that Spirit showed me and said, you're this type of person who can not only want this to show persons that you can touch this, hey, outside of your own internal suffering, even though your survival needs are met, outside of there is this peace that you can share, that you can tell people exists, that you can sing about. But then Spirit led me further deeper than that and said, you have seen that there are people who don't have the ability to sit still and do that because they can't even eat. And so I went off in this state of understanding that I didn't want to just show people how to do that, because I want people to see what I saw in life, because then Spirit can guide them to something bigger, something deeper. But what I don't want in my own life is to lose the meaning of life for me now. Because when I follow my bliss, the children that we care for have become my bliss. As I enjoy speaking about this state of consciousness that we can touch, I'm not saying I'm probably the worst person on the internet to teach you about it, because I don't touch it often enough. I don't stay within it often enough. I often get wrapped up in my emotion because of the nature of my life and the pressures, etc. But what I did see from this was that touching that space, yes, I can tell others that you can touch it too, but what if the child locked in the dark, tormented and tortured? They can't. They can't touch it because the physical pain is too great for them. And so, for me, my meaning is now the children, and making sure that they are safe in a loving family home and provided for in that way. But that narrow canyon is the presence and the peace that I speak of. We all have these many paths we start on. We go into this narrow canyon. The narrow way, as Jesus called it, is where you enter that path. Narrow is the way. You enter the path where you see the present moment for what it is. And it's glorious and it's beautiful and it's outside of yourself, and you realize you can't add to it. You realize that you can't do anything to experience it better than just allowing it. And in that point, you see the point of it is the expression of creation, and it's beautiful. But from there, everyone will fork off again, and they will go off into different avenues. And when they go off into these different avenues, their own meaning will be led by that spirit that is present in that moment. And that spirit will teach and lead them on their own individual journey. And that's why I know the path is to find the self in that narrow canyon, and then let the spirit throw you out as a teacher, as a healer, as a doctor, as a nurse, whatever it might be. And our society would be the utopia that many persons would love to see, where we work in unison. If our education system focused on getting everybody to that narrow canyon, through it, and then allowing them at the end of that education to go out into the world and express what they've touched in here. Doesn't mean you eradicate the other things we're learning about technology and engineering and so on, because these things are beautiful. We need invention. But somewhere we need to incorporate the journey to that canyon and the journey out. And if you've already got to this point where you're wondering, where is it that I go? Then you've got to be like a phoenix. As the Egyptians said, the phoenix sets fire to itself every 500 years. And it does that so it can come back a better version of itself. And the way I have seen that I set fire to myself is sitting still with all of my anxieties and my problems. Instead of putting some entertainment on or distracting myself, if I have food, I have shelter, my family is safe, I sit still and I present to myself, to my problems and my problems to myself. And it's as agonizing and difficult as setting fire to yourself as the phoenix does. But the end result is that your problems come up and you see them. And when you see them, you become conscious of them. Because most of the time we are operating from unconscious brain patterns, and those brain patterns mean that we are not getting into the narrow space often enough or at all, because we work in a space of habit. And so the more you sit still with your habits, the things that hold you back from living your best version of yourself and being your highest good, the more you are on fire as the phoenix is every 500 years to reset itself. And sitting in that fire changes what you are. And as I've always said, earth, water, air, fire, quintessence, new mind, beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma. Again, the fire is there. The phoenix's story is something I'll cover, but there's the fire again, burning up into higher consciousness. This is just not a meaningless myth about a bird. This is telling you, sit in your fire. Set fire to yourself and sit in the presence of all that is wrong with you, all that holds you back, all of your attachments, all of your desires, and work through them. And above all, it's not about eradicating, it's becoming self-aware of them. And when you become aware of them, at that point, you fall into that pool of spirit, and spirit can take you through that narrow canyon and then send you off in the direction where your highest good, your true calling, the purpose for your life, the reason you were knit together in your mother's womb, will be revealed to you. But most of the time, we never reach the narrow canyon because our purpose to life has been given to us by people still on these paths leading to that canyon, trying to distract us from this narrow way into consumerism, into war, into this, into that, into overt sexual desires, etc., etc. And people are trying, instead of going down that narrow path themselves, to feel good with the profit they get from sending you off on these different paths that don't lead there. And that's what we have to, as a society, I believe, work at changing. Because once we all can reach that narrow path, we all can reach spirit, and spirit is the great teacher who will lead us all to our individual meaning of life. This is how I see it. God bless, guys. Have a beautiful day. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, as it really helps us to grow the channel and with it help more children here in Tanzania. Also, don't forget you can support our work by sharing with children in crisis here. be it sharing for a particular need or even sharing one-on-one support for education, housing, food and medical care. It can be done for as little as the cost of a cup of coffee a week back in the West after all. Just visit www.sharetanzania.co.uk to find out more. Lastly, remember you can also support us via Patreon, www.patreon.com/featherstail, and help keep us here in Tanzania to continue our work. The links for the website and for the Patreon are in the description box of this video. Love and light, guys. See you soon.